Well, so I thought of one more really good example of the problem with the emotional response of like exaggerating and getting hyperbolic. Climate change. This is something that's just become a problem because it became so political right away when Al Gore made that movie. Then it became like a left-right issue, and certain people believe in science and certain people don't, and blah, blah, blah. It's a big problem. It's going to require a sort of a big, complicated solution. The side that I agree with, which is that climate change is a problem and we need to do something, even though I don't know exactly what it is we need to do. The people on that side really overstate the case, and they will exaggerate to the point where they keep saying, in 10 years, the world will literally end. The ice caps are going to melt completely. All the animals will die. We'll all be dead in 10 years. And they state it as sort of an absolute, as a way, I guess, of riling people up to do something. The problem is 10 years will pass and the world doesn't end. and so you're giving ammunition to the other side, the people that are saying it's not a real problem. Well, when you state that it's literally the end of the world and then the world doesn't end immediately, you're losing your case. It's an issue that requires a complicated discussion, but if you get hyperbolic and exaggerate, you're just prolonging it, giving ammunition to the other side that think it's not a problem.
It kind of pushes them more into that dismissal state. It pushes them farther away instead of, if they didn't speak hyperbolically about climate change and just say, hey, it's a problem, which almost everybody would agree with to some extent, you know, whatever side of the spectrum you're on. But if you weren't hyperbolic with that, I think we'd have a lot more middle ground. It wouldn't just be immediately dismissed and such a divisive topic. And it's funny you say that, because I was thinking today exactly about climate change, in how it's one of the main, when somebody is a single issue voter, or just there's an item, an issue brought up that they can't move past, it's climate change is way up there, maybe number one. Even I've talked to people who seem, I'd say, more conservative, which I think is more of the realm where they don't care as much about climate change. They seem more conservative about everything else, but they can't get past the climate change issue. They'll say, you know, I can't vote Republican or conservative because they don't take climate change seriously. They all think that climate change isn't a problem.
And the thing is, the people that use climate change politically, who talk big, like they're going to solve problems and they're going to take it seriously, I don't know that they're solving anything. Like they're just using it as a talking point.
I think they took fear tactics, a political, useful political tactic, and ruined what would be an important issue, the environment, because they would say, all right, these guys are insane. They don't even think the world needs help. Okay, let's make people like us better. We'll tell them we care about the environment and they don't. And then that little spark grew into a wildfire and polarized it so much more, where it's like, now we can't even talk about it because you're either denier or you're all about it, and there's no middle ground. So this political fear-mongering tactic caused some serious damage. And I think it's not just climate change, but the fear-mongering tactic, the divisive tactic, in an effort for politicians to win votes and whatever, has gotten way worse recently. I don't know why, but it just feels like it has.
When I look around, it just seems like everything's falling apart. I just don't trust people. We're failing. But it's I want to be optimistic. Let's talk about solutions, or at least let's talk about positive ways to try to orient ourselves and get along in the world.
Okay.
How do you navigate this mess? I think that's sort of what we're going to try and figure out, because we're dealing with huge problems on a massive scale, surrounded by bullshit on all sides, and somehow we have to orient ourselves and do good in the world. Welcome to the Brothers Dim.
Let's start small with an easy issue to fix.
So we're going to be talking about something we mentioned before, something we've been calling having a seat at the table of the stream of information that's flowing into your mind. And so I think this is something that most people do. I don't know if they're necessarily what they call it or what jargon they use, but like just thinking about all the channels you're subscribed to, the people you follow on social media, whatever, everything that's getting into your head, thinking about it with intention and like, okay, what is the best way to structure that? Like, what information should I be allowing into my mind? Who should I be listening to? Lots of people are diagnosing this problem of people falling into their reality tunnels where they're seeing a different reality. Like now you can listen to 100 different people that are all sort of saying the same thing, get you really worked up about something, and can kind of push you into some radical ideology. How do you structure that to be mentally healthy and have a realistic view of what's going on in the world?
Yeah. And so let me say this. When you first mentioned this to me, the seat at the table, what you just described, it seemed a little obvious. And it wasn't until recently that I had kind of an epiphany about how important it actually is. And the reason I had that epiphany is I stopped thinking about it just of knowledge, like, all right, who am I going to grab some knowledge from and, filter it in and take it and use it? Because I kind of assumed, yeah, that's what we do. That's what people do. That's obvious. But then I told you to listen to a certain podcast that I listened to, and you listened to it and you said, this guy seems a little too sure of himself or something along those lines. And I was like, at first kind of dismissed it and was saying, well, yeah, he's got a podcast. He's got to be sure of himself. And I went along. But then I was thinking how important that is. I was thinking it's not necessarily where you're getting this information, this knowledge, but what people, how do they present it? And like, are they inclusive to other people's ideas? And that's what made it so much more valuable to me. I was like, yeah, maybe this guy is a little too certain.
No one is going to be perfect. That's a big part of this. But what I'm trying to do is judge people sort of on a human level, kind of what you're talking about there, where it's like you can have a judgment on the quality of the person that's sort of feeding you this information, right? And if you're sort of determining that they're a good person, they're acting in good faith, and they're trying to have a good conversation and trying to see reality, you put a certain amount of trust in them. This should not be unusual, but I'm constantly surprised at the way other people react. So many people, these people that have a seat at the table in their minds, there are certain ones among them that they are 100% invested in, right? Or maybe an institution. There are people I know who like read the New York Times, and that is fact, right? And it's not just that is fact, but that is also the correct worldview and the correct opinion 100% of the time. And like, this is something I really struggle with. There's no one that I trust 100%. And sort of like what we were talking about before with like, I want to believe in something. I want to find some ideology that seems right so I can stop thinking for myself. I know that's never going to happen. Everyone has problems. Everyone has a blindness, like certain things they can't see. And that's why this can't be a monolith. Like, that's one of my big rules. The stream of information that's coming into your mind cannot be one person or one institution, because that is going to lead you astray. Whatever institution you trust or whatever person you trust, I can just be certain that they don't actually see all of reality, right? They see some sliver of reality. They might have a good take on certain things, but there's no one person you can nail down and say, this person gets it. They understand everything that's going on. They can see everything, and they have the correct opinion about everything. I don't think there's a single human that exists that's like that.
If you can see that, you can take, some information from somebody that you agree with or don't agree with, even though you might think some of their other stuff is wrong. So it's like you said, if somebody has their own seat at the table in their brain and they just have the New York Post or the New York Times and that's their holy grail or whatever, it would be obvious that like, hey, you're only listening to one, but everyone thinks they have a lot of sources. So it's also kind of dangerous. Maybe they do have like 7 seats at the table. It's the New York Post, it's CNN or whatever they are, but all of those seats are taken by people that basically are having the same filter. So you think you're getting information from 7 sources, but they're basically in the same echo chamber, and you're just getting one that you are really getting. So it's a little tricky, because I think if somebody was just listening to one, they would quickly realize, all right, I'm being silly, but they get it from more, 7, 8, and they're confident in it because they've read 7 or 8 different pieces or listened to 7 or 8 different people, but they're still getting almost the same information.
So I think that's another big rule. So it can't be a monolith where it's literally coming from one person. But then there's also a problem if everyone in the little circle agrees with each other. So it seems like one of the rules has to be that there is disagreement among the people that you're allowing to sit at the table. And this is tricky because then you have to listen to people that you don't agree with all of the time. Like if you're listening to, however many people you follow on social media or whatever, and they're all saying the same thing, that should send up a red flag that something is wrong because reality is not that clear. There should be disagreement in the people who are sitting at the table.
There should be, and I think that's more common now maybe than ever. It's more okay societally to ostracize somebody that has a different belief than your group. I don't know why. I'm not going to figure it out, but why can't people listen to somebody they disagree with and, have a discussion about it and then walk away? Maybe one reason is, we've talked about it a few times, is how there are almost 2 or 3 different realities where it's no longer just a debate about something and okay, I'll move on. It's if you're right about your argument here, you've shattered my reality.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, sort of having your worldview sort of tied to your psyche, where if it's in danger, then you're in danger, right? Your mind will explode if your worldview gets exploded. And I think there's obviously tribalism in there, right? Like you want to be on the right team, and then you other the other people, like, oh, they're bad people. We're the good people. They're the bad people. And then that makes you like really dig your heels in because you're sort of getting ready for battle. Like you have to be right. They have to be wrong. Mm-hmm. It's so surprising to me, though, that I guess I don't know how rare this is amongst the general public, but I'm just anecdotally, and what I see a lot in the mainstream is this dismissal, right? Like somebody has said one thing that can be misconstrued a certain way or twisted a certain way, so it's a bad thing that they said once 10 years ago. And for that reason, you should never listen to anything they said. But again, no one is flawless. So no one's going to have an impeccable record and always have the right opinion. Like that doesn't make sense. Like you obviously need to welcome people who have made mistakes, or people from the other side that you don't agree with, or there's not a conversation. Like it just seems so obvious to me that to solve these problems, we have to have a conversation between different points of view to solve anything. It's not a war where you can just kill everyone on the other side. We have to, as a society, come to some sort of agreement and solve these huge, massive problems like climate change and how to structure the government and corporations and the way all the inequality and all of these things. These are huge, complicated issues. It's not simple. It's not going to come down to one debate or one person who has all the answers. It's going to require huge amounts of people to come together and actually be able to talk to each other. But if you're on one of these teams that just dismisses everyone, and not only do you not talk to them, but no one else is allowed to talk to them, right? They're in the out group. You label them one of these, oh, they're a white nationalist, they're a Nazi, they're whatever. Like, these are things that just get thrown around all the time. They get thrown onto people who are not white and who are Jewish. And so it doesn't make sense. But like, they throw out these labels just to poison the well. I mean, this is something you definitely see in the mainstream. You see this in New York Times and all over the place. Any article about someone who's in the out group, anyone who's a heterodox thinker, someone who's just not in the orthodoxy, they're saying something unusual, right? They're not part of the agreed upon narrative. They're thinking somehow outside the box. Anytime the mainstream covers these people, they start by telling you their name and then 3 terrible things about them or 3 labels so that you should dismiss them before you hear what they have to say. Mm-hmm. It'll say, this person X, who is a white nationalist, super Nazi, whatever, they said this, right? And so they're putting a huge amount of effort into dismissing people, just sectioning them off so they're not a part of the conversation. And that just seems obviously wrong, right? Like, we can't do this by just ostracizing a certain amount of people. Like, if we just ostracize all the right people and get them out of the conversation, if we just get rid of Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, the Weinstein brothers, get rid of Joe Rogan, get rid of, if they all disappear, then we're actually going to have a real discussion and solve some issues. I don't think so. These are people that have earned the right to be a part of a conversation, and you can't make any progress by just pretending they don't exist.
Yeah, and that's some sort of societal issue. And it's also a personal issue because some of these people who, hear these names and they get those 3, negative things about them, it's just done. Like, they don't do the work. These people don't even know what their ideas are, what they've said, beyond what they just heard is this little snippet, which might also be manipulated to make them sound worse. But then it's an immediate dismissal. So it's negligent on let's say the media or whoever's doing this, and it's negligent on the person not to dive in a little deeper and figure it out on their own. Why do they disagree and what do they disagree with? And that takes a little more work. And we're very in a convenience culture now. You just want to see the headline and store it somewhere and say, I agree with that, and be done with it. So it's, a twofold problem with the mass media and a personal responsibility issue as well.
It's kind of a paradox in my mind, this issue, because on one hand, I can see that poisoning the well works because there are certain figures who I know I have a negative feeling towards, regardless of I don't yet know what they have to say. Right. So I know that the poisoning the well has worked because it's worked on me. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I'm shocked that this works. And this isn't a big red pill moment for most people in society, because there are so many of these cases of people that have been dismissed. The mainstream is trying to unpeople them, make them just disappear from the internet. Their conversations don't matter. They're evil. Like, it's done all its work to get rid of them. And it's so confident in its diagnosis of these people. And there's so many of them. And if you listen to any of them for a length of time, you will sort of see through the lie, right? Like, oh, this person isn't a white nationalist or a white supremacist. Oh, this person isn't a Nazi. They're actually Jewish. and you just have to listen to them for a few hours, right? So I guess you mentioned the convenience factor. If you just literally never hear any of these outgrouped people talk for a length of time, the illusion can withstand. But shouldn't most people in society have accidentally found one of these bad people and accidentally at least listened to them for an hour? And shouldn't that have dissolved the illusion?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not seeing as much as I'd like. And the ones that I am seeing, if somebody takes a red pill or whatever you want to call that, it's usually more plops them just onto the other side, which is annoying too. So
yeah, they go from one tribe and then they immediately go to another tribe. They don't have that instinct to go, oh, maybe the tribalism is a problem.
Yeah, exactly. I see that more in one direction than the other, I think.
Yeah.
I've seen more like liberal-minded people get red-pilled and then become just way starker conservatives, just like I just said, but it's not, they didn't come in between, they just went from one to the other. I haven't seen that many conservatives go the other direction and end up as leftists, extremists in that area. So I don't know if there's anything to unpack there, but
maybe that's just the momentum of people tend to start off more liberal, and as they get older, they become more conservative, and that just seems to be the direction that things flow.
Mm-hmm, that's true.
And it doesn't tend to flow the other way. Like, I don't know why that is.
I don't know either. And I'm also just trying to think, like you asked, why aren't more people...
Why is this not breaking them out of that system, though? Like, I don't...
Yeah, and it's so obvious today when there are two different realities.
And whichever one you're in, by the way, you're wrong.
How does that not snap?
Neither of those realities is real.
Exactly. So how do you, on either, it doesn't matter which side you're on, say, wait a second, two realities can exist at once. So that, why doesn't that snap them out of it? I wish I knew. I guess the only idea I have is they're tied to their core belief system. So they have a brick house, they have all these ideas, they're set, and seeing it means that shatters. Either way you go. So people don't think, oh, I can be in the middle, I can live in the fog and not be sure about stuff. There's not as many people like that. There's just more that are set. And they can't, I don't know, what would happen if they red-pilled themselves or saw it and they crumbled, and they would have to buck up, realize the reality is gone, and piece one back together. Maybe they'll have a mental episode, or maybe it'll be a slow burn, but I don't see that a lot. I want to see more people just friggin' lose their minds and then be okay in the end, but just be like, oh, God. Everything I know is a lie, and just kind of that's dramatic because some of the stuff is true, but just to kind of piece back your own belief system. You're no longer a sheep. You're no longer in a tribe. Just figure out from different communities and make your own mind up. Why aren't people doing that?
I just want to see people peeping into both realities, right? So that's the idea with the seat at the table. You're going to have people from these different realities at the table. And it's to your benefit if they're able to talk to each other.
Yeah.
So a couple of things of what you're talking about, like, I think you can have this dynamic seat at the table system where you're welcoming in these different points of view, and you can still retain your own worldview, right? You could be on the left or the right or this or that and listen to people on the other side. And that doesn't necessarily poison your mind, or like, what is it that you think people are imagining? Like, sometimes I get the feeling that people are projecting, or they think that, like, oh, if someone hears this voice, one of these de-peopled people, if people were actually hearing them, their words would poison their mind. They would fall for a trick, right? Because they don't have the wherewithal to have their own worldview. And so, Ben Shapiro is going to go out there and say some magic words, and then all the kids are going to fall under his spell. I think that's kind of what they imagine, right? Like he's poisoning their minds, as opposed to he's winning them over with arguments. And if you want to win them back, then you have to do so with arguments.
Yeah, he's not a cult leader, but maybe if that's what people are assuming, then they're going to have a big aversion to it. Yeah, I think that people can no longer do the simple and oldest saying in the book, agree to disagree. You can't talk for a second, hear that side, and it's not like your beliefs are going to be shattered and gone. It's like you listen, you'll hear, you'll have your time to speak, and you go, you know what, I'm not super convinced, or maybe, I didn't think about that, so you got me a little bit there, and then say, all right, well, if coming down to the meat of the matter, agree to disagree, because I still believe my belief and you still believe yours.
If it hurts you so much to even hear the other side's point of view, if that really hurts your ear and it hurts your psyche, I think that should tell you that you live in an illusion, right? Like you're so fragile that even hearing what the other side is will shatter your mind.
And it ties into what we talked about last episode about emotional responses, because it's similar to like somebody insulting you or something, and your response is so emotional and you take it so personally, you don't see past it. But I guess maybe people are responding more emotionally and taking things more personally than they should. Like you said, it's their ideas, their beliefs are tied to their psyche. So if you say a different theory on something political, it personally hurts them so bad. Like that's them now, and your simple opinion on a state or on an issue just torched them, like just made them so angry and emotional because they took it so personally.
Well, I say this, but I also know it is hard to hear those ideas that you don't agree with. Like I get annoyed and I get emotionally upset when listening to someone who I think is full of shit, right? And so
Totally.
I can relate. Like it makes sense.
Fucking A.
And that would be a great excuse just like to say, oh, this person's full of shit. I don't need to listen to them. So I can understand where people are coming from, but I just think it's a necessity. And I don't hear people talking about this enough. Like you just have to take the time to investigate some of these different realities, not because I think any of the realities is correct, but I think the system of having separate realities itself is wrong. Mm-hmm. I don't think that any of these ideologies is correct. I think you have to step out of it. You have to step out of your tribe. At least that's what I'm trying to do for myself. I mean, that's sort of where I ended up automatically. I just don't, I have this feeling that I would want to belong into a tribe, but I'm also just averse to it. I've never found one that seems, I just never found one I can relate to. They all seem wrong on some fundamental level.
They're not inclusive or something.
There's always some issue. Like no matter what the thing is, like if you get everyone together based on a religion or based on a political ideology, or if you get everyone together based on loving Star Wars, right? Whatever it is, when everyone comes together in a group to love one thing, there is a problem. There's a shadow. There's a deep shadow in there. There's something wrong.
Just thinking too, like when you said, sometimes you'll dismiss somebody because you just hear some kind of keyword. I've had some experiences where I do dismiss people and I don't think it's necessarily that bad. And it's usually one, like I had a coworker who's fuming and spewing this, I don't know, well, it's full of hate, but it was also the same stuff I've heard, many people say in the mainstream. Not to the point where I'm just dismissing them, because there's only two options in that, is to kind of argue back, and with somebody that was so heated, it's just going to turn into an argument, like a yell. I could tell there would be no civil conversation, or to just let them do it and walk away, so to speak, which is the one I take when I'm hearing somebody who I know that they are not going to change their mind. They are dug into this belief they have, and it seems to be like one that is a part of a tribe. And usually I used to be in the boat of, what, I can, give a little of my opinion and maybe it'll shed a little bit of light on theirs, and I'll even listen to theirs a little bit. But there's just some people nowadays that I'll hear and I'm just like, there's no point to respond. They're done. They got to figure it out on their own, that they're just so stuck in one version of reality or whatever it is.
I mean, I feel the same way, and I think it's a problem. I would like for myself to be open and be able to calmly speak to anyone, right? I think calmness is a big part, like tying into our conversation last week. If climate change is your big issue, and you really think it's really important, and it's really happening, and we're fucked, and all the animals are dying, and the temperature's rising, and humanity's fucked and you think it's the pivotal issue and it's the most important thing, and you explode and you're screaming in the streets. Your emotions are reflective of how massive the problem is. It's such a big problem. You are losing your mind. Guess how many minds you change? None. And you send people going in the opposite direction. Like if you lose your mind, it doesn't matter if you're on the right side, or if you're actually trying to do good for the world. If you're trying to do good for the world, but you're doing it by being erratic and losing your mind, becoming too emotional, you're not going to change minds.
So true.
So another piece of this seat at the table of the people that you're letting into your mind, it would be really helpful if they're able to calmly talk to each other. So you want people from different ideologies, from different parts of the world, different industries. You're really trying to diversify in as many dimensions as you can. And obviously, you can't listen to all 7 billion people on the planet. So you're having to filter down and make some decisions. And so you're not going to be able to represent every single worldview, but you're just trying to do your best. And then I would say the next important quality, besides them being diverse, is that they all sort of have the ability to speak to each other. Now, this could be literally, because you might be following people that have podcasts or shows or whatever. They actually will literally talk to other intellectuals or people, whatever, and they can do so calmly. So this last week, I have an example of a terrible discussion and a good one. Do you know who Ethan Klein is?
No.
Ethan Klein has this channel, H3H3. I've liked him for a long time. He's sort of a comedian. Now he does like a podcast, but he's really, really far on the left, and he sort of bows down to the institutions and really doesn't want you to do any thinking. You should just agree with whatever Fauci says, or what, like you shouldn't think for yourself. You should just agree, whatever. So this week, Ethan Klein was going to do a debate with Steven Crowder, right? So Ethan's coming, he's very liberal. He's on the left. Crowder is more conservative. He's on the right. They're going to have a debate. This could be great, right? This is what I want. I want these people from different sides. I don't necessarily want a debate, because then you're trying to defeat them in an argument. I would rather have a calm conversation, but it's approaching the thing that I want. Well, what do you think happened? Did you hear about this?
My guess is that it didn't go well. That's my guess.
So Steven Crowder shows up. He's taking it very seriously, and he posed a question to Ethan. And then instead of answering it, Ethan went on some weird tangent. And then he brought on, it turned out it was a sham. He wasn't going to debate Ethan Klein. He was actually going to debate Sam Seder. And this upset Steven Crowder. And then Steven Crowder sort of wussed out. He was too upset, and I think he left. Also, Steven Crowder posted the DMs between them. And Steven Crowder's like, okay, no tricks. We're going to have an honest debate. Ethan Klein's like, yeah, of course. Here, I think this could be really interesting. And then he pulls this stunt where he bows out of the debate immediately and brings in a substitute person to debate Steven Crowder because, they think that this new guy will crush Crowder in the debate. That's all they care about. Uh-huh. Because to him, I think it's more important to win the war than to have a conversation. I think from his side, from Ethan Klein's side, I think his view of the world is so clear, and he's so clearly on the correct side. You can't learn anything from your opponent. All you can do is destroy them. And maybe if they had a real discussion, maybe they would have had some kind of exchange of ideas, but it just didn't happen.
A debate, first off, is a very specific thing, like you touched on. In a debate, it's like a competition, and there's a winner, and it's not a conversation that goes somewhere. So if what they were going to do was a debate, and Crowder shows up and he's like, oh, here's the world's best debater, time for you to get crushed. That's a little bit annoying. It's just kind of like showing up to a boxing match and you're in the same weight class, and then he's like, no, behind me is this giant and he's going to destroy you. If it was a debate. If it was just an argument, or not an argument, and a conversation, then I would say, Crowder, why not just sit there and converse with this other guy and say, well, it's weird that you made me converse with this other guy, but there's no one I won't talk to, so let's go.
Yeah, I guess I wish Crowder would have stuck around and had the conversation, but I don't blame him for leaving.
No.
I think you can see a little bit of how their minds work with Sam Seder and Ethan Klein, and that from their point of view, this was a victory. Crowder went there to talk to Ethan Klein so that they can talk about their worldview. But from Ethan Klein's side, I think he sees his position as interchangeable with anyone that's in that group. It's not important that he talks to him. Because he's not talking to him. He's talking to what he represents, right? And the ideas that he's echoing that come from the collective or the tribe that he's a part of. You're debating my tribe, not me.
So, I mean, you're right. And that's a sneaky tactic, the switcheroo. But it does bring up a point that I was going to mention of like, yeah, the difference of a debate and just like a conversation. Like, for example, Ben Shapiro is like a professional debater on the right. And he's got videos of like Ben crushes because he's just talented at that skill. Like he's got a ton of information. He knows how to speak.
He's known for talking very quickly, so he can get a lot of points out very quickly.
Yeah. But he also does a podcast. He's good at it, and I know it's important to separate what a debate is and what a conversation is. And he'll reach across the aisle or invite whoever onto his podcast. And I haven't really watched him too much, but the ones that I do, when he has somebody, of the opposing view, he knows kind of to turn that off a little bit and to listen. Not every conversation is going to be, I'll debunk this with my facts and, use these debate tactics to win. So I think that's a good example of separating it. And someone like Shapiro or Sam Cedar, those are powerful tools and important weapons and people you want on your side for those kind of specific moments where you want to use them.
You want them on your side if you're thinking about it like a war. Like, I like this distinction that you've drawn between debate and conversation. I think that debate is almost counterproductive because then they dig their heels in more, they get more entrenched in winning the argument. And the only reason they want to know about the opponent's argument is so that they can defeat it, not because they want to consider it. Whereas a conversation, you're not trying to defeat your opponent.
I also see it as a good team sometimes. Like you have a player on your team that is better than you and just better than anyone else at this thing. And I guess you kind of send them in to get this message across. But then you have other people on your team that are better at, reading people and be a little more personable and listen to make sure the other side's getting their time to talk, kind of mediate and say, well, look, you're offending him, or you're getting offended, or hey, you've been screaming, or you're talking too much. Let's find some middle ground here.
Well, I was actually going to use Ben Shapiro as the other example this week. So this week he talked to Russell Brand. And so Ben Shapiro obviously represents the more conservative side, and Russell Brand is kind of a radical, strange leftist. I don't even know what to call him. He's like maybe an anarchist or a liberal. I don't know what the right label is.
He's open-minded.
And so this week, these two came together on Russell Brand's podcast, and they had a long-form discussion. And guess what? It was incredibly productive, because they weren't trying to defeat each other. And like, I follow Russell Brand, so I hear him speak a lot. I like the people he talks to. I don't follow Ben Shapiro, but Ben Shapiro pops up in my streams all the time because he seems like one of these people that, even though he's heavily entrenched, right? He seems really confident in his worldview, but he's willing to really take seriously these conversations, and he's not trying to defeat them. Right? When Russell Brand will ask him an honest question, and he'll give him an honest answer that's explaining how he's looking at the world. I have not seen any of these debates, because I've seen the memes of like Ben Shapiro destroys liberal whatever. Is that him putting that up, or is that more, does he have like a toxic crowd, or what's going on there? Why does he have this warlike thing happening?
I don't think it's warlike. I don't know if it's him, but somebody labels them as these Ben Shapiro destroys videos. And I don't think they're necessarily bad, because they are debates. Like, he knows the difference. Like you said, he talked to Russell Brand. I didn't even know that. He has other people with other views on his show, and he's good at it. But when he does a debate, he destroys in the sense that he just wins the debate so flawlessly, especially when he goes against somebody who is kind of clearly coming from a collective mindset and not just having their own opinions. He can trash them or just kind of destroy just take them down. But he's interesting. So that's a good person to bring up. He can be cold and logical and, win a debate, but he can turn it off. And that's somebody you might want at the table because he's proven it. He can talk to a liberal like Russell Brand. The ones he talks to on his show are liberal. He invites them and brings them on, and he's not a jerk that's just trying to prove them wrong or belittle them. He just has a conversation. So at least we're aware that he can turn off destroy mode or debate mode.
And I've sort of only really seen the softer side of him. Like I think the mainstream idea of him is the warrior side. And like, I wouldn't necessarily welcome the warrior at my table because I don't want there to be a lot of combat. But I do welcome the softer side where I can see him genuinely trying to just in good faith have open conversations with people.
I think there is some kind of importance that I haven't put my finger on yet of somebody who is strongly sure about their convictions. Because if you have too many people that are very open-minded and want to stay civil, sometimes it can take 2 hours to get to the meat of the matter that could have been in an hour. But if you have somebody who is just, very strong in their beliefs, that person goes, that's wrong. What they're saying is wrong. They're wrong because of this, and this is why I'm right. That's not very pleasant, but sometimes I guess you want to get to the point. So I don't know exactly what I'm saying, but I think it could be useful to have somebody that can cut the nonsense and give it to you how it is at your table.
You need to have a diverse group of people, different types of people, right? Like they might be really diverse in their ideologies, let's say, but if they're all super combative, might not be a lot of progress in the conversation. But if they're all really nice and open and they're not willing to step into combat and call someone else wrong, then also there's not going to be a lot of progress in that conversation, right? So you need this diversity in types of people. I don't think you have to worry about, like, let's say you're considering Ben Shapiro and you're seeing him as too combative. Well, if this was literally happening and he was trying to defeat everyone's ideas and they were literally sitting at a table having a conversation, and then he just fucking pounds all his points down and he's calling everyone out, and maybe he's making good arguments, but it kind of shuts everyone else up. That might happen in reality, but because this is a metaphor and this is happening in your mind, you can tune him up and down and listen to him when you want. And then you can completely turn him off and listen to someone that's completely opposed and give them as much time as you want. So like you have the freedom to welcome combative people in because they can't actually overtake the conversation because you are fully in control of how much you listen.
You just made the point I was kind of trying to make. It was more succinct. I like the way you said it. So that's kind of a good example of it too, of maybe, I'm getting emotional or making all these points, but somebody like you is there to kind of calm it down, reiterate their point, and express it in a more palatable way.
And I don't know all the different types of people that should be included, right? Like, I don't know the formula. I know it needs to be diverse. Like, I know you need different types of people. Once in a while, welcoming in a strange person that hurts your ears, like it hurts you to listen to them. But like, I think you can't close those people out automatically. Like you have to challenge yourself.
Yeah, you learn more when you're a little uncomfortable, or you throw in somebody that's a bit of a wild card or someone that's going to disrupt a little bit, because I think sometimes we learn the most when we're in an area we haven't been or in an uncomfortable situation. And maybe people aren't as willing to throw that person in that makes them very uncomfortable because it's not fun to be uncomfortable. But again, that's where you gain a lot of experience. Naturally, in like the real world, usually the table, this metaphorical table, is filled with more aggressive types of people. The people that aren't afraid to say, I know exactly what's right, you're wrong. People more aggressive and confident or what have you. And it's filled less with the other type of people that are more calm, have a higher emotional IQ. People like, I would say, me and you are less likely to aggressively get to this table, and so you're kind of left in the dust. So it's important to seek out those people and give them a voice.
And I think that's difficult. It's hard to seek out the quiet people. Like, obviously, the loud people that are really aggressive are going to be easy to spot, but they can't be the majority of the people you're letting in. You need to find those other people, but that's a challenge. Like, it's maybe easier in real life, right? If you're at a real dinner party and there's somebody off being quiet, that's easy to identify them. But if we're talking about this way of things coming into you through the internet, those quiet people kind of don't even exist to you, because, like, how would you find them? So we're talking about sort of the ideas of this metaphorically, like how to construct the table. But then how do you actually do it? Like, what is the practical way of identifying these people? And I think that's the main thing. Like, how do you find these people? Like, what's worked for me is when you find someone that you like, they'll come with like a novel idea. I like them. I listen to them for a while. Then I'm on board. And then hopefully they have a podcast that's not a monologue. I hate listening to monologues. I like dialogues. You're sort of using them as a torch to light the way to find other types of interesting people. I'll follow a comedian. They have another comedian on. I like them. I'll follow them. Maybe at some point they speak to someone who's not in the comedy profession. And, oh, I like them. I'll follow them over here. And now that opens my eyes up to a different world, right? And they're talking about different things. And they talk to a different kind of a person. I'll follow them over there. And I'm just kind of following people around, jumping off of people I like. I don't think this is the perfect system, but this is just the most practical way that I actually do it.
I mean, that's a good system. Luckily, these people you're talking about bring on different people, interesting characters that you might not otherwise see in the mainstream or what have you. One thing about having a monologuist, because I veer more in that world, is that you can get the seed of what they're giving you quicker. So if you're after, a quick hit of some information and you trust this person, that's one way to put that seed into your head, because you don't have time to get it everywhere else.
Well, how do you find that one person then, if they're not connected to someone else in a web?
How do I find them? I'm thinking now of the people I listen to, and how did I...
Is it the YouTube algorithm or something?
I think it's recommendations from friends, predominantly, or somehow it pops up somewhere. But it's weird, because I know there's certain people I listen to that don't really pop up where I go. So I don't know how I got to them.
I mean, I think friends' recommendations is good. I think the YouTube algorithm sucks, and it's always going to misguide you. Like, I do not trust the Google Corporation to have control of my mind and who I follow. I think that's a bad idea.
That's so true. And it's point in case is there's sometimes where I hear about someone I want to follow and I can't find that person. Like, maybe there's someone that Google doesn't like, but it's like, if I didn't know, if somebody didn't tell me, I would never have found this person. And that's another thing is the people who end up at the top. I mean, sometimes it's just because they're good and they get a natural following. But nowadays, I feel like the people who shake up to the top, they're purposefully gearing it to more mainstream. So they know what's going to hit hard. They know what would make them popular. And that's just who they are, but they kind of phone that in and gear it towards that. Whereas the people that I might want to find and listen to, they have 100 views on YouTube. I'm never going to find them, and they're never going to get popular because it's so just the type of media that's out there. I don't know what to say. It's hard to compete with. So occasionally I'll find someone with like 1,000 views and I'm like, I don't know how I stumbled upon you, but I like you. Like this podcast, for example, maybe some people will like it. The Brothers Dim. We're not too aggressively on one side or the other.
They'll never find it.
Maybe people would like it naturally, but where do you find something like this? Because you can't go to the left, you can't go to the right, you can't put a big headline on it and say, holy shit, they just debunked this guy and this shit on him or whatever the fuck. So yeah, these softer takes, they just are hard to find an audience.
Man, I think it's a whole other conversation that we're going to have. Like, I definitely see this problem where the cream that rises to the top is a low quality mind. Like, the people that make
Exactly.
it are not good. I don't know that it's necessarily they're playing to the mainstream, but they have a lot of things in common that are bad and that are disingenuous and misleading, and they're not open. There are these false people. Somehow they float to the top, and I think it's a real problem. I don't,
Yeah, that's a whole episode. I think you're right.
I think another problem with listening to a monologue is I think there's something to having that person be challenged in the moment. When it's an actual live conversation, people have to think on their feet, and so they're not going down their programmed talking points. Someone presents a new angle, and then they got to think about it from that new direction. It's a good way to identify people who are running a program or people who actually have minds.
That's a good point. Like, I'll find someone that's a solo podcaster. Like, I'll say Peter Schiff. He does economics, and he's just a brilliant economist. He's got, 40 years of experience, blah, blah, blah. So I like to get, his seed and his 30, 40-minute podcast. I find it very entertaining. And then the next step is also fun, is then I see him on shows or talking to other people and doing like what you said, being on his toes, and it's clearly not what he, programmed to say. And usually I find if I like them solo, as a solo person, I liked how they handle themselves talking to somebody else or just being interviewed. But occasionally I will start with someone solo and I see them talking to other people and I don't like how they handle themselves, or, they're too aggressive or whatever it is. So the funny part is, I guess, at this seat of the table, the intelligence is a factor, but personality is equal or some kind of big factor as well. So it's not a table of the smartest people of the field. It's a table of the people who have a lot of good knowledge of it, definitely versed in it, whatever it is, but then also are the better at interacting with others, at taking cues, at whatever all the other stuff is.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you could have an infinite amount of time and storage in your mind, then maybe you would go to whoever the head of every industry is. You'd want to hear from every one of them, every mathematician, whoever's at the very top of that field. But it would take you so much time and energy to digest all of that it's in the real world impossible. And so we have to find ways of getting to that information on a more human level, knowing that you can't take in infinity.
Yeah.
Like, one way to think about this, does this remind you of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
In what way?
What's the meaning of life, the universe, and everything?
42.
What came to that conclusion?
Oh, the planet that is a computer that, processed it all and came up with the answer or something like that. Supercomputer. If
you think about the Earth as a supercomputer, right? The best computer we have is all of the minds on Earth all at once, from all of their different perspectives, thinking and communicating together. Like, if we were able to easily communicate with this giant hive mind and all these different perspectives and have a good conversation, we would get a lot of answers, right? When you have all of humanity's minds working together, you're going to get fairly close to reality or the truth or whatever. Problem is, we don't have that. We're not talking together effectively. But I just thought of that image. It kind of reminded me of this. Like, we're trying to do that on a very, very small scale. It's like, okay, we can't have everyone talk to each other. Who can I identify and welcome into my mind to have a conversation to approach some sense of reality that's not based in tribal warfare or an ideology?
That's an interesting way to think about it. I'm getting the visual of like some god or someone asking the Earth a question, and somehow there's a program where every human listens and composes all their thoughts, and the computer syncs it all together, combines them, whatever it is, and then the Earth projects an answer of what, the consensus would be.
Yeah, we have a lot more to talk about. I have this instinct that I would like to ask the audience, like, who do you recommend, right? Who are the people that you think should have a seat at the table? But the problem with that is it sucks. Like you mentioned before, it's nice when a friend recommends something good to you. But in reality, I think most of the recommendations I get from people are shit. Like they hurt my ears. I don't like the person. It's hard for me to hear a lot. It's hard for me to find people who can actually speak to me on a level I can accept. This is not an easy task, man. Finding the right people. It's hard.
And if we opened it up to the masses or asked the question to it, pretending we had an audience, which we don't, it would be even more difficult because of how polarized we are. And I guess one way to not ostracize anyone is to debate or bring in two people, one from, I guess, opposing sides, and talk about them at the same time. So I don't know if there is a way to not offend an audience, but, you know, bring in two at once and go over both of them. And I guess that's it. Because, I mean, if you bring in one, if you say, all right, we're going to bring in Jordan Peterson, or that we're going to bring in Anderson Cooper, then if that's the only one you talk about for that episode, I feel like the other side will just instinctively not tune in. And again, that's putting them in sides, but I'm just thinking generally how people think. Yeah, you'd have to do double duty. Just make sure you get both type of people in.
It's a problem for anyone who's like a heterodox thinker. Like you're sort of talking about, well, what if you bring in one person from each side? But it's not always about sides, right? There's people like Sam Harris who says a lot of things that upset everyone, right? Because he's not a part of either tribe, right? And so how would you suggest someone like that, who both sides might identify as the enemy, right? Then no one's going to fucking want to hear it.
It's a people problem. But I guess what we're getting at is the only people that are going to want to hear this, for example.
No one's going to want to hear this.
No, is nobody.
We're doing this just for us.
Which is fine, which is still is what I like. Gets it off my chest. Well, I was going to say it would be people like us, obviously, that aren't on either side. And I guess that's a dwindling number. There's like 40% on one side, 40% on the other.
I think it's a growing number, isn't it? The people outside, the people who are sort of politically homeless, isn't that number growing?
Maybe growing, but it's still small. And it's also hard to target those people. Like, where do you find those people? If we wanted to blow up this podcast, for example, we could go on Reddit and say, you know, this destroys Trump's theory or the other thing, or something that's like going to get people, and it's not going to be how we genuinely feel. Like, that's how you can get those type of audiences and blow up a channel or a podcast, is kind of the shock factor. Where do you softly nudge, hey, these guys gently talk about topics for an hour?
There's no audience. I don't know how to find an audience.
It's like you said in that one episode of, is there a leader anymore that we just follow out of love or because we like them? They naturally gather an audience just because of the way they are. Like, name one person on television.
That person wouldn't be allowed on television.
Yeah, they don't bring in the other side.
The institutions behind that would be opposed to whoever that person is.
And if they do bring on the other side, it's a debate. You know, they bring them on and the 4 people on the screen, and one of them's, and it's going to be entertaining, and it's fucking stressful because it's not civil, and like you said, it's not very productive. It's usually ends up more emotionally driven, and you know, the harder you can hit somebody, the better. It's ratings worthy or what have you. But whenever they do what Ben Shapiro and Russell Brand did, they don't do it like that. It's always a debate. It's never, all right, let's bring someone from the other side in. Like you said, it doesn't exist on cable. It's just not going to happen.
We got a real problem here. But we can only worry about it on an individual level for now. Figure out who to listen to for ourselves. Try to get ourselves oriented in the world as best we can so we can actually be productive.
I'm going to fill some seats at my table because there, you know, you can rotate them. I'm not going to be by saying that, I mean, like, I want to expand my horizons more. I have my people that I listen to a lot. They take up some seats in my head. And I'm ready to get back out there and find someone, plop them in, check them out.
I'm always rotating. Like, because even people I find that I think are giving me a good look at reality, at some point I find them annoying, or I know what they're going to say, or it's just too hard to hear, right? The world has gone mad, and it's not good for me to hear about all the corruption and bullshit that's going on because it just makes me too upset.
It is bad, but it's good that you can abandon those people. And lastly, I guess I have to be careful because I've had a tendency to go find the people that are those toxic type of, I know everything, this is where you get it. And I've definitely learned that I hate that now, but I still have this instinctual attraction to find people that are saying they basically have the answer. I hate them, but I end up next to them all the time. And then I go, fuck, again? This guy, he thinks he knows everything, but it takes me a while to realize it.
That's completely natural. Confidence works, right? You don't want to listen to someone who's wishy-washy, doesn't really know what's going on. We automatically want to listen to the person who seems like they've got a hold of things and they can really say it passionately.
Well, then they don't want to listen to us if we're wishing-washing and fog-headed.
I mean, the only thing that I keep saying I'm confident on is that everyone is wrong about something, that no one has the whole truth. And I wonder if I'll ever change my mind about that.
I hope I don't, because I am in that exact boat. And if somebody thinks they know what's better for the world or than everyone else, I will still listen because maybe they have solid info in there, but I'll hate that person or I just won't believe or trust that person. I have a massive aversion to that now, and I'm glad. And if I ever, because how that could never change. If somebody thinks they know everything and they're right for sure, they're wrong, and they're also a toxic person to be around. And maybe they have good information. They could be geniuses, and you hear them and you go, all right, well, that's really smart. But overall, they're toxic and they're fucking wrong. I don't like them.
All right, thanks for listening. All right, bye.
Have a good night.
Do